here in Finland, a couple of hours or 3 hours north of the capital in Helsinki. We're here for Husqvarna's 2020 Enduro model launch. We have had a heck of a day here in the Finnish forest. It's been a lot of fun. Really quite sandy tracks and a lot of wood. For me, I guess, it was going to be really interesting coming to this launch for two reasons. One, that I've had a 2019 model FE 350 as a project bike for quite some time, so I know the bikes really well. And secondly, because about 3 weeks ago we went to Spain and went to KTM's launch. KTM also launching a new generation of Enduro Bike 7 models. So, we're not going to pretend. I mean, Husqvarna and KTM roll off the same production line in the factory in Austria. There's a common platform between the two. So as much as, nothing can aggravate a Husqvarna marketing person more than comparing them to KTM's, there's a reality there that these bikes do share, some key components. So, very much what we saw with the KTMs a few weeks ago. We've got a new 150 two-stroke with fuel injection. We've got different frames with, stiffer torsionally and longitudinally, which is interesting. Quite a few changes to suspension, particularly the fork, where you get sort of softer springs and firmer damping. And a lot of changes across the board with the engine, in particular the exhaust system. They've done a lot of effort with the exhaust. And then, of course, there's, a 450 501 engine, which has got, it's about 15 mil lower, say 500 grams off the head, and a very different sort of cylinder head. So obviously those things are in common between the two bikes, and we're not going to pretend otherwise. But I think the interesting thing really with what the Husky's probably gone a step or two further. Reason being is I think you'd say that their bodywork is drastically changed compared to its predecessor. The KTMs were kind of much more of a subtle change. What you're looking at here with both the 2- and 4-stroke Enduro range is very, very similar to what the motocross bikes look like now in Husqvarna's range. The seat also a lot different. Probably the only quibble for me today was the seat a little bit slippery on some of the more technical stuff, but maybe that's got to do with my fitness and not staying up on the pegs enough. And I think, but probably the most significant thing aside from that bodywork is that they got a geometry change. So we'll talk about it in more detail in the coming weeks through articles on the website. But in essence, they've gone to a different pull rod on the linkage, which has now gone back to the motocross spec linkage. That means that the bike sits down a little more in the arse, which creates a lower seat height by about 10 mil at the front of the seat, around 20 at the rear. It also rakes out the fork just by about 0.7 of a degree, 3/4 of a degree. And that's really interesting. And on top of that, the changes to the subframe, they've actually engineered a little bit of flex into that polyamide subframe, which has got a 30% carbon component in it too. So they're talking about it first time ever where they've done that. So yes, there's a lot of overlap with what we saw with KTM, but these Huskies have gone a little bit further. We've had a great chat with some of the designers. We'll be, as always, bringing you some interviews with those guys to talk about the upgrades that each of the bikes of each of the models has got in greater detail. In terms of riding, I think the biggest thing for me today, obviously the different bodywork was really significant. I'm sort of a little short of 6 foot. I liked the lower seat height. I know that some of the taller guys were sort of saying that it was probably a little too low for them, but I think I really noticed it out here when you were tipping the bike over through ruts and on some of the really technical terrain where you can get your feet down. That was really confidence inspiring. Probably for me, the change in the geometry and the way that works with the new frame and suspension, the biggest thing I noticed today was the confidence I had to actually turn the bike in under brake still, even under bumpy sections, and turning it into ruts and dropping it into things. I was probably doing that smoother today than I've done in my life on a bike. So I think it seems that the changes in geometry have made pretty significant difference to that. In terms of my favourites, well, like I found the KTM launch, the 350 4-stroke as a all-rounder. I really think the 250 2-stroke has narrowed the gap definitely on the 300. So I always lean toward the 350 because it's just a jack of all trades and just such an amazing bike in that it's got that playfulness of the smaller capacity bikes and yet the torque of the bigger guys. But today in the sand, I think the 450 was a real standout because that thing, for a 450, the agility and its flickability and its rideability is just kind of absolutely next level. So toss up for me today between that 350 and a 450 with the 250 2-stroke sort of close behind. But like I said, we got a bunch of interviews with the designers who, to their credit, are really frank in terms of talking about the development process, of chassis, of engine, bodywork, mapping, the whole bit. So some really interesting insights from those guys. So make sure you check out that on the website over the coming weeks.